Call to order the regular meeting of the West Basin Municipal Water District Engineering and Operations Committee and a special meeting of the Board of Directors of the West Basin Municipal Water District. And with that, Mr. General Manager, we have a termination of a forum.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Director Tommy Favad. Here. Chairman Desi Alvarez.
Here,
Director Gloria Gray. Was she on the phone? She is.
thank you, man.
Director Gloria Gray. Director Don Deere. Here. Director Scott Houston. And Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum of the Board of Directors. We'll work with Director Gloria Gray because I believe she is online, but we'll make sure that it's noted when she's back on the line.
Director Gray may be joining us shortly. Okay, with that, do we have any public comments today?
Mr. Chairman, we have not received any requests for public comment prior to this meeting, though this meeting has been held both in person and virtually. If there's any member of the public that would like to speak, please indicate so by raising your virtual hand. And Mr. Chairman, I do not see a request for public comment.
And I don't believe we have any presentations today.
We do not.
And no action calendar, so we will move on to the information calendar. And the first item for presentation is the Harbor South Bay project update, Mills Park and North Udina Recycled Water Pipeline Project. So, Mr. General Manager, please introduce that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and this is kind of a crossover item because we have been briefing the Water Policy and Legislative Committee for the past several months, as we do all the time with our federal legislative update, trying to brief everybody on what's happening in Washington, D.C. We have mentioned before that we have experienced some issues in relation to our Harbor South Bay funding. And so we wanted to bring this item here to the Engineering Operations Committee to seek some feedback from the committee and board of directors. So with that, we do have Veronica Govea, our engineering supervisor, as well as Matt Vey, our manager of water policy and resources development, here for the presentation. And this item begins on packet page 3.
All right, thank you, EJ, and good afternoon, directors. I'm going to go through the slides that begin on page 8 of the agenda packet. Great, thank you. So just to give a brief.
What page is there?
Page 8. Yeah. So just to give a brief background on this project. So this is something that's been around for 30 plus years now, our federal partnership with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. In 1992 is when we received our first $35 million authorization for design and construction of water-related infrastructure. This was under the Section 219 program, which is considered environmental infrastructure. All of that original funding authorization has been fully expended on laterals, pump stations, other water infrastructure. In 2018, as that funding was about to expire, with our new federal lobbyist in hand, VSA, they were able to get another authorization of $35 million to give us a total of $70 million now for this program. Of that new $35 million, there's been $4.8 million that's been appropriated. However, that money has not been either received or spent at all yet. It's only been appropriated to us. And to talk about the actual project sites for the next couple of slides, I'll turn it over to Veronica.
Yeah. So next slide, please. So the original plan was to utilize the money available from the Army Corps of Engineers to do 2 projects, the Mills Park Recycled Water Pipeline Project and the North Gardena Pipeline Project. So this slide in particular shows the Mills Park and essentially shows 2 sites and approximate cost, both of them 2.8 million with a 17-month duration. Again, there was a park and a school to be served under the regional plan with a 35 acre feet water delivery. On the slide, you can see some stars. Those stars are indicating where the potential connection point is. Mills Park is the easiest target. There's one connection point. However, for the school, there's the potential to have two different locations to the system. One is on the south portion of the school and the other one is on the north portion of the school. So not knowing the full details of where the final connection will be, we were able to anticipate that it could be either one. So we planned for the worst case scenario. So the laterals here is just an alternative. So once we do the design, we will be able to know exactly what the actual alignment will be. Next.
Yeah, the plan's already on there. Let me see the executive. Hang on. Is the
On
executive summary?
North Gardena recycle water pipeline. This is in the city of Gardena and very similar to the Mills Park. We had look into the potential alignments that we could follow in order to serve a park and a school. The total cost of the design, construction management for this particular lateral was 3.6 million. Again, with a 17-month duration and approximately 24 acre feet of water delivery. These particular sites had a little bit more flexibility or other locations where we could connect. So that's why we had also a couple of locations that we identify as potential points of connection. Next slide.
So to fund these projects required kind of assembling together a number of different sources. The major portion of which came from the federal funding from the appropriations of $4.8 million. However, that program does require a 25% local cost share. And so we made up that cost share by securing some state grant funding through Department of Water Resources, as well as some local funding commitments. So this funding source, the state grant, that is the source that's at risk now, and that's why we're presenting this item this month. So just to go through the details real quick here, the state grant funding through IRWM Proposition 1 Round 2, we received $1.3 million grant from DWR. This was a disadvantaged community involvement program project. This is important because normally there's a 50% cost share, so we would have had to come up with $650,000 of our own. However, because of that specific program, that cost share is waived. So we get the full $1.3 million without having to do any additional cost share. Several years ago is when the board authorized the submittal of the application and kind of accepting the terms of the grant. And again, that's now, we've been submitting quarterly updates as part of this grant. Obviously, there's been very little progress. And so that's why LA County has kind of brought it to our attention that we need to make progress on this source of funding, or they could potentially take away the grant from us. I'll get into a little more details on that, but let me move forward to the next slide. So as I mentioned, there was also local funding partners that have kind of come to the table to help support and cost share the local share of this, notably California Water Service and the City of Gardena. So about $500,000 between those two entities to provide funding. We had other meetings with City of Carson, Golden State Water Company, LAUSD. They're supportive of the project, but they didn't, weren't in a position to be a funding partner at this time. Now it has been it's been a while since we had to check in with Cal Water Service and City of Gardena. However, there's been nothing to tell us that, I think we can still continue to count on them as a local cost share partner going forward. Next slide. So when you put all the sources together, comes out to about $6.6 million, which based on our current cost estimates is enough funding to fund all 4 project sites through these 2 projects. Next slide. And as I mentioned, these are all the project supporters that we've kind of identified it throughout the process. Again, not are all funding partners, but all support the expansion of recycled water infrastructure in their communities. Next slide. We couldn't have done this without our congressional proponents several years ago. Former Senator Dianne Feinstein, Senator Alex Padilla, and Congresswoman Maxine Waters were all champions for this project, and they're what led us to receiving the majority of the funding, the $4.8 million for these projects. Next slide, please. So by my math, it's been about 10 months since we provided a project kind of status update to this committee. And at that time, what we reported was that the letter report, which is one of the required documents that kind of outlines what the projects are going to entail, that letter report had been submitted to the U.S. Army Corps. Their engineering division had already reviewed that document and had kind of ordered it up the ladder. So it was at the point where the commander was going to review the agreement, the PPA, the agreement next. And at that time, they were kind of telling us like, hey, it's looking like October, November is when we can expect to execute that agreement and this project can move forward. However, I think as we know and the board might know, we've now been held at this step for the past 10 months with very little progress. Staff has been very proactive at working with our federal lobbyists, with our senator's office, their staff. We've had multiple calls with the U.S. Army Corps to see how we can move this agreement forward. However, unfortunately, to date, we've had very little progress and have kind of been kept in the dark as to what's going on with the agreement and this funding in general. Next slide, please. So because of that and the timing, as I mentioned, we've been submitting quarterly updates to DWR about our Prop 1 grant. However, they're kind of coming now to a point where they were originally expecting a project completion by December of 2027. Staff recently applied for a project extension to get us another 6 months to get us to June 2028. Looks like that'll go through without any problem, but that still only gives us less than 2 years to do the design and construction for the full project. I can tell you that we've been receiving a lot of pressure recently from LA County to move the project forward. Basically saying, hey, you guys can't show any progress. We're going to have to reallocate that money to some other projects so that we can utilize that grant money. And that pressure is getting more and more every month, I can tell you. One thing that they did suggest to us just in the last month or so was to explore possibly reducing the scope of the project and to limit it to maybe one of the sites that could be fully funded with just the $1.3 million in state funding. Now, if we did choose to explore this route, it's still not a guarantee. Ultimately, that will lie with Department of Water Resources to approve that. But it is something that staff at least is open to exploring with further discussion and feedback from the board. Next slide. We do have some advocates out there. Senator Padilla in February provided comments during a Senate Energy and Public Works Committee hearing where he called out the Army Corps' kind of lack of communications, lack of progress on a lot of water infrastructure projects. And he specifically mentioned West Basin's Harbor South Bay Recycled Water Project during those comments. You can see John Watts in the background there. John's been a very good friend to us and our federal lobbyists. And so we want to thank him and the senator, as well as VSA, for doing all that they can to try to bring light to this issue. Now to talk a little bit about what a reduced scope project could look like, I'll turn it over to Veronica.
Yes, so next slide, please. Okay, so looking into potential solutions, we look at both projects, the North Gardena and the Mills Park. So one of the items that is a requirement for the grant and for Army Corps of Engineers is environmental documentation that needs to be completed. under the Harbor South Bay project a few years ago, we had the opportunity to look at the Mills Park as a potential site to be connected. And that was a programmatic environmental documentation that we had prepared, and anticipating that at some point maybe the Mills Park could become a project. We included the Mills Park, the alignment that goes from our connection point on the Lamo to the park. So that portion of the alignment has already been incorporated into the CEQA documentation that has already been completed and filed. The portion, the alignment that goes from the park to the school was not included on the CEQA documentation. And if we were to include that alignment, we will need to go back to our CEQA documentation and add a segment. So looking into potential solutions on how, is there a way that we could utilize this 1.3 million without waiting for the Army Corps of Engineers to allow us to, or to provide the money for the rest of the fundings? We look at what we have, which is the environmental documentation that is completed and a requirement. And we looked at, well, what does that mean? So we were able to recalculate a cost, yes, for the alignment for under $1 million, with a project duration being conservative on the time that it will take to bid, get approvals and all that stuff for a completion of 15 months. And again, the pipeline would be reduced from the over 3,000 feet or 3,000 feet to 800 feet only to serve the park, which is 11 acres. Again, the grant right now is for 1.3 million. The 1 million seems to cover the work there. So, and having other contributions from potential aids might be able to help us to fully fund the project. Next slide. So again, this is just a kind of rephrasing, again, what Matt had already mentioned. The SPDL, that's basically the Army Corps of Engineers at the Los Angeles district level, they have already completed the review of the letter report that originally had included the alignments from the North Gardena and the Mills Park. So the engineering department has already signed off on those. And it's at the commander level, which is the South District Division, the SPD, where the agreement or the final signature is pending. Again, we do not know when the agreement is going to be signed. So the funding for the rest of the alignment on the Mills Park, from the Mills Park to the school and to the North Gardena at this point basically will be unknown. So into the next slide, please. Trying to see if we could meet the requirements from the grant to, if we were to proceed forward with a reduced scope, yes, meaning just the alignment that goes from the connection point to Memorial Mills Park. It seemed like we definitely could meet the deadline that the grant has as for us to spend that money. So having a completion basically by the end of 2027, just focusing on that portion of the alignment that reduces scope of work. Next slide.
Okay, so just a couple last slides here. So again, at this point, this is staff's perspective on what our options are. One is status quo. So we continue to wait for the Army Corps to finalize the agreement. That even with the extension that requires the full project to be designed and built by June 2028, I think that's possible, but probably not likely. To get that done within less than 2 years is put a lot of pressure on us and Army Corps to make that happen. Now, with that option, I think the drawback, of course, is that it does put our state funding at risk if no agreement comes forth in the next, I would say 2 months. I really think we have maybe 2 months, 3 tops, where if we don't show progress, the state will take that funding away from us and put it to another project. The other option is the reduced scope that Veronica talked about. So it would be limited to the Mills Memorial Park connection. So the one connection site, it utilizes the 1.3 million state funding that has no cost share. We have the environmental in place, so it should be a pretty quick timeline, as Veronica kind of talked about there. The downside, I guess, would be that it does get rid of we use the source of funding, but then it no longer is available to us in the future for and we'll need, cost share if we want to do the rest of the federal project. However, I think the perspective is that you're going to lose that funding anyway. So it's not really a factor. Again, I just want to mention that the reduced scope, it's been proposed to us and something that we could take to DWR in the county, but it still is going to require DWR approval. So even if we got that direction from the board today, we would still have to make sure, put it through the evaluation phase to make sure that it works for DWR. Next slide, last slide here. So staff is seeking feedback and direction as to which project option to pursue. If there's a third option out there that comes to mind, feel free to share that with us as well. But these are the kind of the two primary ones that we have kind of before you today. So with that, we're happy to take any questions and to let the board discuss and provide feedback.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could add a couple of things. First of all, what you're seeing today and what you're hearing is staff bringing this to your attention because we don't want to see, a lot of work goes into securing grant funds and the partnerships. The committee and board really put it, gave us specific direction to go out and seek 100% funding for us to move forward with these two projects. We are very proud of the work that went into it. We're there, but we're now facing some challenges that we weren't anticipating. So we're bringing this to you because we do notice or want you to know that the $1.3 million is at risk. I want to stress this because you can see it in this top bullet that we would continue to coordinate with our advocacy teams and our state federal representatives if the direction is to maintain the status quo. But I want you to know that this would include a bigger and broader approach. I would be working directly with LA County Public Works, Mark Pastrella, so I would go straight to the top to really put pressure on them to secure that funding. If I didn't feel like I was getting some momentum there, then we would broaden that up to build kind of some advocacy approach from our local leaders to apply pressure on not just the LA County Public Works, but also the Department of Water Resources to see anything that we can do to extend that timeline. I think what you're seeing from Public Works is just the calendaring of integrated regional water management as you secure grant funds, you put together the application. And Mr. Chairman, I know you're extremely aware of this process, but for the others, once you put together that proposal, you put it in there, you get funded. What they're trying to do is maintain the calendar with Department of Water Resources for the entirety, the suite of projects. And you have a couple of projects that are straggling, if you will. And this is one of those. So it would be a multi-pronged effort. Matt mentioned John Watts. He has been a true friend to West Basin, working with the senator, obviously, but he has not been afraid to call the Department of Water Resources on our behalf and let them know of his concerns and the problems that we're facing. We feel like we've received some good feedback, but there's still, as Matt said, this pressure to move forward and make decisions. So the suggestion of reducing the scope, I don't want to say it came from any one direction, but it seems to be coming from the county saying, hey, you can move forward with a portion of the project. Let's get it going. So if the feedback that we get is to maintain the status quo, it will be an all-out effort to maintain that $1.3 million, and we'll do everything we can to keep that available to us.
Is that it?
That's it.
All right, thank you. So basically, the item we're considering today is the reality that the Corps of Engineer funding is not going to come to pass. And we've discussed that in the past because of the change in the administration and attitude that this administration is taking. So where we're at is there was some additional funding through the Irwin process. And the Irwin group would like to be able to preserve that fund.
That is correct.
And a lot of that is led by the county. So I just want to clarify before we open this up for discussion. The county is going to then support just keeping the 1.2 million that's available through the Irwin grant.
For a reduced scope in order to maintain our timelines.
As presented.
Yes.
So Did I hear you know that you needed to work for the county? Isn't it being driven by the county?
I think that I think that they are willing to support a reduced scope. But obviously, our preference would be to complete the entirety of the project. And the pressure that we're getting from the county is the timelines of the total suite of projects. And so we're getting some support, but also pushback from the county.
But they don't, the key, and correct me on this one, the key issue for the county is they don't want to compromise some of the funding in the current urban funding a lot.
I think that's a big part of their concerns, but I think that their broader concern is the overall calendar of all of the projects.
But that's not realistic. Given the administration, we're never gonna accomplish that.
Right.
So, so we're really looking at is reduced scope in order to preserve the urban funding
That is
for
correct.
the group, the bigger group, not just us.
That is correct. And as Matt said, it would need to be approved ultimately by the Department of Water Resources.
Right. So hopefully everybody gets that and, Director Flavie, any questions?
All right, thank you, Chair. And thank you for clarifying that. I have a couple questions when it comes to the city of Carson. So what was the feedback from the city of Carson on them not participating in the funding part?
Yeah, so Director Flavai, we had a couple in-person meetings with City of Carson, and I think you actually attended one with us last
I
year.
remember, yeah.
And I think they support recycled water infrastructure. It kind of seemed like they said, okay, we're gonna consider your offer and see if we can make something happen. We had follow-ups with them and it never just materialized or went anywhere. So it never was about, we don't support the project or anything like that. They just didn't seem to come forward ultimately with any funding offer. So it's certainly something we could explore further. I don't think it was a hard no. It just wasn't a yes necessarily.
If I could just add it, and you see it if you travel down to Avalon, the city of Carson has numerous projects that are ongoing right now in preparation for the Olympics. And I think the timing of this actually plays into the city's decision as far as prioritizing projects. And so I don't think it's reached that priority yet. And I don't know that it would, but I think that they have a lot of projects right now that they're funding.
Yeah, the thing I don't understand is that city of Gardena can contribute 100,000 and city of Carson 0. That's what I don't understand. But my second question is when it comes to the timeline, you mentioned the timeline, EJ, about the of the total of the projects. Now, when it comes to like the different phases for the projects that are being talked about here, is the county worried about that we're not going to meet the the phases on completing those phases when it comes to the projects? Or
Well, I think we're being upfront with the county that if we're going to do the totality of the projects, the two laterals,
Yeah.
that we would need to wait for the U.S. Army Corps to execute this agreement. And at this time, we don't have anything positive to report back. And so we're letting them know, we're being proactive and saying, hey, we've done everything we can. The Army Corps has agreed that the draft will suffice. It meets all their requirements. And Matt and Veronica have done an excellent job of working it to a certain point, but it's kind of above their level, if you will, and within the administration. And I do want to stress this. If you want to talk about the entirety of the politics, I would say that this funding was through an act of Congress. One way or the other, I believe we're going to get that. But when you talk about the Army Corps, the U.S. Army Corps, and getting the agreement done, that's an administrative process. And politically, I think that there are ways to delay that process and hold that up. But we do have a bill that was passed and signed by the president back in twenty.
Different president.
Yes. But it was done. And so I feel confident that at some point we will get those funds one way or the other. But I think right now administratively, it's difficult to tell.
Got it. Okay, my last question would be, if we were to do the reduced, project and kind of satisfy what the county wants, okay, we want you to move forward with something, right? Are we, is it still on the table where we can complete the projects at a later time? Or just starting it and then completing the projects at a later time? Is that still on the table?
Yes, and I can speak to that. In the past, we have worked also with the Army Corps of Engineers on a project. And for whatever reason, the project has morphed into a different alignment or a different project for whatever reason.
Mhm.
And we have been able to basically change the scope of work.
Yeah.
It will take, some work project description essentially, but definitely they will be able to modify the letter report.
Yeah, and if we modify it and then something gets approved at a later time, right, like you mentioned, and then that still goes through. Is that correct?
Yes.
Why don't you go to slide 3 on page 9? I think that one answers Director Fave's question. So Director Fave, that's the entire project. The reduced project just goes to that first leg and ends at Mills Park. And then that where it shows a loop, which would not be a loop, it's either one option or the other. There's two alignments. The alignment should be picked up later on if the U.S. Corps of Engineer money became available.
Okay.
I'm going to interject in a comment, which is a little bit political in nature. I appreciate staff thinking that the funding, because it was approved by Congress, will be there. I don't know if that's going to be realistic in the future, just because of probably how much things are changing with the current administration. So if we ever saw that, it will be after 2028. So we probably would see that we can come back and try to claim this money, but between now and then, I'm just of the opinion that we have better things to do or not spending our energy on.
Yeah, I'm just trying to be optimistic here. If we do start on something and we pick up some funding, some other funding later to actually fill the gap. And then, the U.S. Corps of Engineers doesn't go through, but we pick up another grant at a later time. Are we able to use that grant to go towards the projects?
Technically, yes, but I would say that, and this, to Matt and his team's credit, coupling the two projects together gave us enough water supply to basically score well in a competitive grant process. You had 2 school sites and 2 city park sites. And so you're able to kind of cobble it together to make it competitive. The individual sites, one or the other, it's difficult. It would be difficult for us to go out and get a specific grant for that. You're seeing 1.3 for all of these sites in totality for the state grant. So it's not easy. I think that they deserve a lot of credit for packaging that together, but it gets more and more difficult as you shrink the project.
And what would be the cost, the difference, if we did a modified project? What would be the difference that needs to make up for that total cost?
So the reduced scope of work to the Mills Park is estimated to be about within $1 million. The total Mills Park is 2.8, so it would be basically the difference. So
You got it. Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, hello.
Yes, Director Gray, go ahead.
I just wanted to have you recognize my presence. I've been on the phone for a while, so I've heard the discussion. But thank you.
Thank you. Director Deal, do you have any comments?
Well, I was gonna ask the staff, what is your recommendation, that's the direction we should go?
Well, I think that's why we're bringing it to you is because we don't want to lose that money. If we were to reduce the scope, we have a project in the hand that we can move forward with. And so I think that that would be our recommendation. But we recognize that that's not what we had originally planned and what the board really supported at that time.
Okay. So,
And Director Gray, do you have any comments on this?
You know, thanks for asking. I was kind of in and out of the discussion. So what are the two options on the table?
The two items would be to maintain the status quo, wait and work with the U.S. Army Corps and hopefully move forward with that funding and hopefully that the Department of Water Resources funding would still be there. But because we're concerned about losing that money, the other option is to reduce the scope, and staff would work with LA County, DWR, and the U.S. Army Corps to ensure option feasibility, and will pursue design and construction procurement for that reduced scope.
So losing the money from the Army Corps, is that what you're saying, losing that money, that funding?
Well, with the reduced scope, we'd be moving forward without the U.S. Army Corps, but we would continue to work with them with the hope of getting it at some point. Make sure I stated that correctly, Matt. Okay.
And so moving forward with the project, which is a little bit different than we originally wanted to do, versus waiting for what? I mean, I'm still trying to understand the two options. I'm sorry, I'm trying to understand it.
So
Tell
the
me
U.S. Army
again.
Corps, we have a draft agreement. It needs to be authorized by the administration and move forward. And without that happening, we don't believe that the funding from the U.S. Army Corps would come to fruition.
Okay, I got it now. I would say move forward with what we have. I don't think the funding is guaranteed for the next few years, and so I would not wait for that. If we can, if it's possible that we may lose our other funding, I would move forward with the project.
So Director Gray, you're saying you would move forward with a modified project, recognizing that getting the money from the Corps of Engineers is not realistic in the next couple of years.
Right. I don't think it's realistic, and so if we're waiting for that, and if we wait for that and we're in jeopardy of losing other funding, I would rather go with what we know for sure that we're going to do, what we have right now.
Yeah, I agree with Director Gray on this one. When it comes to the reduced scope of work, I'm moving forward with that recommendation. Because I mean, the money's there. I mean, you have money that's there just to get started with the project. And I hate for this to fall off and then, leave these projects, somewhere where, we're not going to get to in a couple of years or whatever, but, yeah. That's me.
Director Deere?
I agree both.
It's very unfortunate that we have spent an awful lot of time, effort, and getting appropriations through the Corps of Engineers for specific projects. A lot of effort was done in both the environmental processes and the design of these projects, and then obtaining additional financing in addition to the Corps money to get them completed. And that we submit a report to the Corps, and at every administrative level, it's been approved. And then when it's moved to Washington, D.C. for final sign-off, it hits a wall and it gets rejected. And I think we need to recognize that it's a very sad situation that we're finding ourselves in these days. And we talked about it earlier. I don't think we're gonna see that money. That leaves us with a much smaller amount of money to move forward with a reduced scope, not project. And if we want to save that money, then this would be the option. This is probably realistic, can be done relatively quickly. It's really not a lot of work. My concern is something that try to address at the very beginning is part of this, not part. I think a lot of this is driven by the county's desire to maintain funding for the integrated regional water management plan and the current cycle. And then that they're not willing to go 100% of the way. So I'm hoping that the case would be that they recognize that, you know, in order to do that, we move forward with the project. I still would like to point out that building these projects, when you look at the amount of water that's being served versus the cost of the project, none of these projects really make any economic sense. And so from that point of view, probably we need to really reevaluate building purple pipe, as most agencies have. But the consensus of the board is to move forward with the option of preserving the integrated regional water management plan funding and go with the reduced scope project. Did I capture that about right? Thank you.
Well, thank you for that direction. I'll be working with our manager of engineering as well as our assistant general manager to develop a detailed plan. And we'll be coming back through this committee to present that to you in order to maximize the use of that $1.3 million from Department of Water Resources through.
All right. So with that, we will move on to the next item, which is the project update on the NC Little Water Reclamation Plant Solids Handling Improvement Project and owner furnished equipment delivery issues. I think it's kind of one of these things that you hate to come up, but you have to deal with them. So, Mr. General Manager, please introduce the item and make.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this item will be presented by Kevin Cullen, our engineer 3, and the item begins on packet page 24.
Thanks, CJ. Good afternoon, Chairman Alvarez, members of the committee and board. As mentioned, I'll be providing a project update on our ECL solids handling improvements project. You can follow me along in the presentation starting on packet page 28. Next slide, please. In terms of the overall project, the project is still on schedule for our anticipated completion date of January 13th. Currently, the critical path of the project is through the delivery of our PLCs and the programming is our most critical aspect currently. In terms of construction costs, the construction contract sits at about $10.8 million. Through June, we've expended about $6 million. In terms of RFIs, we're sitting at a total of 92, with 91 being processed, and submittals a total of 118, with 150 of the 15 of those closed out and approved. Next slide. This slide recaps the project scope. I think this is a recurring slide for all, so I'll move on to the next slide unless the committee would like me to go through the aspects of the scope. Go next. I'll quickly highlight some of the construction progress through these photos from our inspection. Back on June 16th, we had a planned electrical outage for an installation of our UPS, which supplies backup power to our control system. We've also begun installing quite a bit of conduit and electrical equipment. You can see there on June 19th, some anchorage of electrical disconnect switches, specifically for our new diluted acid pumps. Next slide, please. Some more progress. We took delivery of one of our biggest equipment items, which is the new feed pumps. These are oval feed pumps that came from Germany and will supply the presses with the sludge. We have proceeded with the installation of those pumps, the anchorage, and the associated piping as well. In addition, at the presses, we've had ongoing hydraulic tubing installation and beginning to get ready for commission. Next slide, please. Did want to highlight the 5 owner furnished POs that we have as part of this project, 3 of which are basically complete, while 2 remain open. The first we have is Pace Dewatering Systems, who's providing the temporary dewatering system to support the solids handling operation at ECL while we rehab the solids handling building. That PO is roughly $1.1 million. It's about 70% expended, and we will have the temporary system online through the beginning of November this year. We have universal filtration. All of the equipment components have been received and installed on the presses. The only outstanding bit there is some startup support services through the vendor. We have a completed PO from Blue Angel, who provided breakers for the temporary dewatering system. That's been received and installed. We have a PO with Arnauz Construction for the 2 sludge tanks, which I'll highlight in the coming slides. And then finally, we have a complete PO from Advanced Systems Co., who supplied an odor control system for the solids building. Next slide. For our welded steel tanks PO, we have an open procurement for 2 21,000-gallon welded steel tanks that are used as part of the sludge conditioning process. These were pre-procured by West Basin staff with an award in August 2024, which was a low bid award with a planned delivery of September 2025. You might recall we came to the committee back in April to highlight some of the challenges we were encountering with the delivery of these tanks and the need to supply supplemental inspection services to help with QA/QC on these tanks and ensure that the district was going to receive quality tanks. The engineer's estimate during the design phase for these tanks was $416,000. That included both delivery and taxes. Ultimately, our PO with Arnauz sits at $375,000 currently, which also includes delivery and taxes. And to date, based on the progress of the tanks, we paid about $311,000 with about $64,000 remaining. Next slide, please. So following the supplemental inspection services that we provided in May and June, we continued to struggle with the manufacturer providing untimely updates, poor communication, and even accessibility for our inspectors to inspect the tanks. Ultimately, this culminated in Arnauz taking the tanks from their manufacturer and bringing them to the site at the end of June. They got to ECL on June 24th, and we inspected them upon arrival. I did want to highlight that upon receiving them, they were noticeably incomplete and had some instances of non-conformance. So we rejected the tanks and we issued a letter of non-conformance and are working with Arnauz to complete the PO currently. Next slide, please. So in the days that followed after the delivery of the tanks, based on our rejection, Arnauz brought out their own crane and their own workers, since the work is still considered to be ongoing, to verify dimensions, finish up some of the outstanding work, and correct any deficiencies that we identified through our inspection team. Next slide, please. I did want to just highlight what we're talking about in terms of non-conformances, and I will say some of these pictures are the worst of the worst, but nonetheless, they're good examples. You can see a cracked weld on the left-hand side. We found a few of these on the tanks, which did get repaired under the supervision of the certified welding inspector. Additionally, there was some pitting and gashes from welded tabs that were on the tanks to help with alignment during fabrication. So all these issues have been cleaned up. And then finally, on the right-hand side, you can see that the bottom skirt on the tank was notched in some areas and not notched in other areas, which basically prevented the ability to even install the tanks as the anchor bolt didn't have a through hole. So all of these were corrected and we're moving forward. Next slide, please. Again, just highlighting some of the non-conformances and the before and afters. You can see there was some undercut welds and some pitting. All of these have been gone over and cleaned up. Next slide, please. So in terms of West Basin actions, I highlighted our formal notification of nonconformance and rejection of the tanks. This was sent out on July 2nd. In the preceding days, we've been coordinating closely with district legal counsel and just posturing ourselves so we can be best suited to see these tanks through completion in the best interest of the district. So Arnaz has submitted a plan to complete the remaining work on site at ECL. This does present some challenges in terms of site constraints and logistics. However, we work closely with them as well as the Jacobs team to establish clear expectations and understanding of what those constraints are with the protection of the health and safety of all people on site, our guests, and the operations of ECL itself. So through that communication, we've set a deadline, which is very fair, but tight in our opinion, of August 5th. And that date was selected by using the language that is afforded to us in the PO terms, as well as what we thought was realistic without impacting the construction schedule. So that deadline of August 5th has been set. And since this communication, Arnaz has been working with both day crew and night crews and has been working through the weekend as well. So they're understanding where we're at. In terms of the upcoming work schedule, we're in that first bullet point there, which is sandblasting and coating of the tank interiors, tops and bottoms. Following the completion of this, the tanks will be set on their foundations at the solids handling building, where our contractor Kiewit can anchor the tanks and Arnaz can finish the remaining surface preparation and coating of the tank exterior. One thing I did want to highlight as well, we came to the E&O committee in April and requested additional funding for that supplemental inspection. I will say we did exhaust those funds through our efforts of trying to maintain good quality assurance and control while the tanks were up in Sanger, California, near Fresno. Now that there is still remaining work, there are still outstanding inspection services, and we want to maintain that high level of QAPC. So we're going to continue working with our construction management team, keeping those costs low, but providing them where needed. So there is a little bit of contingency left, but our projections are that we will expend that. So once we're able to have an accurate cost estimate, we'll likely return to the committee and board with the request for amendment. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you for being proactive, on when it comes to the inspections and stuff. That West Basin is working closely with the contractors to ensure that they're in compliance, with the dates and so forth. So I really appreciate it. And I know when you gave the report, a while ago, on the funding, where the funding would go to and everything, it just proves to us that, the great work that you guys are doing. So, yeah, thank you for giving us an update. This is what I like to see, on future projects, and keeping us updated on, being strict on when it comes to compliance, and then holding the contractors accountable, to make sure that they, they do the work on time and on budget. So, thank you.
Do you have any comments?
I basically agree and keep up the good work.
And Director Gray, do you have any comments?
Oh, just thank you for the presentation. Thank you.
I have a question. So I'm a little bit confused. Have we rejected the tanks? Or are the tanks still on site and Arnaz is going to modify them as necessary in order to make them work?
Yeah, to be crystal clear, the district has rejected the tanks. They are still under the ownership of Arnaz. We still reserve the right to reject them further and continue to reject them until they strictly meet the requirements of the PO. In working with Arnaz, we've worked, internally and with the Jacobs team to establish a work area on site at ECL. They're in control of that work area, and they're meeting both the district and Jacobs requirements to complete the work on site.
Okay, so the tanks are rejected, but not really. Arnaz is insisting that they can meet they can correct whatever imperfections are on the tanks and comply with the specification. That's the situation we're in.
Director Alvarez, I would just add, from a legal perspective, it is very clear that we have rejected. Yes,
But the tanks are still at
that is correct.
Arnaz is still there. We've paid $300 and some odd $1,000 of the PO. And Arnaz is gonna be working on the tanks. In other words, we have not told the contractor or us separately the contractor ordered new tanks.
We have not ordered new tanks.
Okay. So that in order to complete the overall project, those tanks are necessary. And Arnaz is still under contract to deliver tanks. But what they're really trying to do is, as you shown in, I forget the slide, one of your previous slides before and after, so when we had issues with the wells, they brought in and they corrected those wells. So that's what's happening, and the Arnaz believes they're gonna be able to deliver the tanks per specification.
Correct. Yeah, they were very lenient upon a manufacturer, kind of a mom and pop shop up in Fresno. They have now taken the tanks in their possession and are self-performing the remainder of their work as they are contractors and have built projects for us like the PV pump station.
So I'm glad to see that you guys issued a notice rejecting the tanks. But, you know, issuing a notice rejecting the tanks and really bringing in new tanks, there's a big gap there. And the contractor has an awful lot of rights in the process. Which then comes back to this whole issue of schedule. The tanks probably are needed for a while. Is our general contractor comfortable? I think it's Hewlett, right, for this one? Is Hewlett comfortable that it's not going to delay their schedule?
Yeah, we've, in anticipation of this being a possible issue and realizing Arnaz's, late delivery of the tanks, months ago, we started analyzing the construction sequencing and our abilities to commission the project with or without these tanks. And we're confident that we will be able to get through the commissioning phase. Should these tanks be delayed beyond August 5th? August 5th still doesn't impact the project schedule, but if it goes beyond that, we're confident we'll be able to commission the project without these two tanks. What we will struggle with is turning the plant back over to normal operations and operations through the presses.
Okay, so we can commission the project and put it in service without the tanks?
It seems that way. We're still working through the logistics of that, but yeah.
So if that's the case, why do we need the tanks at all if they're going to be able to make sufficient modifications?
There's quite the difference in operations between the temporary system and the permanent system, mainly having to do with the conditioning of the sludge and the addition of lime. So that conditioning happens within these tanks. The centrifuges actually don't use any lime. So the current tanks that are on site and in use are kind of just acting as holding tanks for the thickened sludge. Whereas once we transfer back over to long-term operations, we'll be then adding lime back to the tanks for pH stabilization for our biosolids permit.
So to kind of keep that interim operation in place, we are going to end up having to pay more money?
We're trying to
Negotiate.
analyze this with Jacobs, the current operations, because from the time when we determined that we needed those two tanks to commission, at that time, we were dealing with this different water quality versus now, like we're seeing more stable water quality and lower TSS, and hence we haven't have the need to have 3 tanks or versus the 2 tanks. So we're trying to fine tune that and in constant discussion with Jacobs to see if that's doable or not.
You guys are getting me a little confused. I think I got the picture and then it's like, but so we're ultimately going to end up with tanks, whether they're these 2 or some other one. And I have a feeling that it will be these 2 tanks. By the time that Arnaz is done making all of the corrections, we're going to have to accept the tank. I guess I come back to the concern is delays and additional costs. And who's gonna bear those? And personally, I know who I go after. It should be Arnaz, because they're the ones causing all of it. So whoever's doing it, keeping track of all of this stuff.
Certainly.
Okay. Very unfortunate. Would have been better that she would order the tanks. Right. All right. So with that, if there's no other questions or comments, we will move on to our next item, which is the engineering operations update.
Yes, Mr.
Enjoy,
Chairman.
gentlemen.
Yes, for this presentation, as always, we do have a team here to present this item. We do have Susanna Lee, our manager of engineering, Orlando Rodriguez, our engineering supervisor, Camilo Castillo, our engineer 2, as well as John Venner, our engineer 3. And this item begins on packet page 41.
Yes, so good afternoon, directors. And so before I go into the presentations, I just want to highlight a couple items from the memo. As we ended our fiscal year 25-26, and just like to highlight that our berry production, we ended at over 90% recycled water injections for the last 3 months. Last quarter, we're actually consistently about 98 to 99% recycled water. So that is awesome news. And if you want to see the overall graph for the year, it's on page 74. And then there's also one items on the memo that just want to let the board know that the compliance team is discussing with the regional board to just follow up on some missing data from JMM regarding the brine permit. So if there's anything worthy to bring back to update the board, the compliance team will do that in the August board cycle. With that, if there's no question on those 2 items, we can go to the presentations. On page 47, yeah. This month we normally, as normal, we are the agenda is as listed. But for the project highlights, we're gonna start with a customer service type coordination project update that Orlando will bring to the board. We just want to make sure that the board is aware of this item because MWD will be issuing an IFQ for construction soon. And so following up with the last 3 projects, 2 of them are for the Torrance Refinery plant, and then that we are going to be constructing soon. And then lastly, John will update the board with the DCS project. Next slide, please. Looking ahead for August, looks like will be a full month. We have a developer request project, so Veronica will bring agreement to the board if that's one available for the board to consider. And then the second item on call engineering services, we received a total of 14 proposals from 14 consulting firms. The team is beginning to review and will be hopefully bringing that items for board considerations in August. And then there are 2 construction projects contract award, Torrance Severe Acid Tank, and then also sodium hypochlorite tank replacement. Last but not least, hopefully we're working hard with Jacobs to come to terms with the amendments for year 2 of the O&M contract, and we're targeting August, obviously, to bring to the board for the adjustment in time for September 1st, 2nd year contract. But with that, I will turn it over to Orlando.
Perfect. Thank you, Susanna. Can you please let me go to the slide or at least page 50 of the agenda packet? There you go. So this project, I would say, is a little bit unique here as it's more of a kind of client support, customer service project. Known to us as the NWD Service Connection WB23A. So back in 2018, Golden State essentially requested a additional service connection to the W23 area location, because right now what's happening is they essentially serve Culver City. They have two connections serving Culver City off of the same feeder. So what they would like is redundancy to feeding Culver City. So they would like another connection to the Sepulveda feeder, because right now they have two connections coming off the Culver City feeder. So therefore they requested that additional service connection. So this includes installing a new turnout structure on Sepulveda Boulevard, new pipelines, new valves, and obviously a street restoration once this is completed. Here internally, West Basin, we have been assisting Golden State facilitating pass-through payments to NWD, also review of drawings and some project management support along the way. So the reason we're bringing this up now is because after a number of years, we finally have a construction bid package that was completed in May of this year, 2026. And we are ready to go out to solicitation soon. And all the project costs have been completely funded by Golden State. So what typically happens is MWD would make a request to West Basin requesting funds, and then we invoice Golden State for those funds, and then we pay MWD on their behalf. And just on the, I know it's a little bit hard to see, but the exhibit on the right there, you'll see service connections are just, they're kind of like the one on the left-hand side. And there's 23 coming off of the Culver City feeder, and they'll be relocated kind of across. I mean, it doesn't seem that long, but it is. But there'll be another connection off of the Sepulveda feeder, which is known as WB23A. Next slide, please. Here's just kind of a quick project summary. One of the kind of biggest milestones that we had recently that took longer than expected was Culver City approval. That happened in March of 2026, and we're kind of going back and forth on their traffic control plans. Again, this is a kind of a large arterial, right? Sepulveda Boulevard. So there's a lot of back and forth in terms of lane closures, staging, and so forth. So we recently got that approved by Culver City, and that was kind of the last big task in order for us to then complete the bid package, which was done in May of 2026. And now NWD will be issuing a solicitation for construction services on October of 2026, but then anticipated award of construction services in January of next year, 2027. So we're looking at start around early 2027 and completion in early 2028. And just no R5 submittals as of yet, but what I wanted to point out is at the very bottom of the estimated cost here is NWD has spent to date $1.3 million, again, Golden State funds. And the approximate or preliminary construction cost estimate for this project is $4,667,600, with a total project cost of $7,336,800. And I'll get more to that in a little bit. Next slide, please. So recently, NWD sent us West Basin to the general manager a letter requesting additional funds, and this is in lieu of an anticipated shutdown that's scheduled for late next year. The shutdown cost of that is about $1.7 million, and that shutdown is absolutely necessary in order to achieve the tie-in to the Sepulveda feeder. Without that, there is no project. So we have been scheduled around November of 2027 to do that shutdown and that tie-in work. So again, we will issue a solicitation for construction services this year in October and starting construction early next year. And the goal is to do a lot of the upfront construction work ahead of that tie-in early next year, and essentially leave the tie-in to the very end to do a lot of the legwork, and then at the very end when we're ready to go. And what's in that tie-in, biggest factor is really draining that feeder, all the water that's in there, disposing of that, and having an NWD crew dig that up and then help in performing that actual tie-in itself. So there's a lot of work in that, which is why it's about a $1.7 million request. So that was sent to the general manager last week. So we're working right now on invoicing Golden State to request those funds. And they already approved that. So they'll be sending those funds to West Basin and we'll then be able to pay FWD with that. So the project completion for this overall would be early in 2028. And that's it for this particular project. If there are any questions.
Thank you. Any question?
No questions.
I just want to commend Orlando for keeping the work, because that took a lot of back and forth between Golden State and the MWD, because at one point there was some really contested discussions in between the two agencies. So to get to this far, that took a lot of coordinations and obviously good relationships. Yeah, in between. So.
It's a big line to tie into and put in a new service. I would say, why do you need it? Let's move on. Go ahead, Steve.
That's it. I think next slide, I'll present it again. Oh, there it is. Thank you. Yeah, so this presentation starts on page 55 of the agenda packet. So this project is for the Torrance Refinery Water Recycling Plant, sulfuric acid day tank area, R&R project. But here's just a quick project summary. We completed a 100% draft submittal in March of this year. Construction bid package was then subsequently completed in April 2026, which we actually this is different. We actually issued a construction a solicitation for construction this month, so we're a month ahead of schedule again. And we anticipate awarding it next month at the board meeting. We actually had the pre-bid meeting today, so I had the pre-bid meeting and went to the job walk today earlier today. So actually pretty successful. 7 contractors showed up. So spent to date design about $62,000. Preliminary construction costs from the consultants about $439,000. And the proposed budget for this next fiscal year is $569,000. So the total project cost is about $600,000. Next slide, please. So just kind of a really quick overview of the project itself. This is the chemical containment area, or at least the day tank area at Torrance for the sulfuric acid that is heavily deteriorated, at least for the concrete. So the scope of work really is to install a temporary bypass system for injecting the sulfuric acid, which is key to producing the low pressure boiler feed for the refinery. So then we'll, after the bypass system is installed, we will be removing all that existing equipment that's in there and essentially building the concrete itself, the containment area from the ground up again. So that means the containment curve, the pads themselves, the pedestals for pumps, the tank itself, and the sump area. And then after that is completed, we will be reinstalling all of the equipment back. So Jacobs, our plant operators, have been fully involved in this. So I've been reviewing the drawings with those specifications and so forth, and really hands-on throughout the duration of this project. So again, Carollo, which is the design consultant on this, completed the bid package in April this year. So, and they provided their cost estimate, which was previously mentioned at $439,000. Next slide, please. So again, this is actually I should have updated this, but this we actually submitted this in open go on July 6th to our open go system. So we'll be recommending an award next month at the board meeting and construction to begin in October. We always say time frame. We did have a pre-bid meeting today. It was attended by 7 contractors, and about 6 of those contractors attended the optional sidewalk today, which was called at the Torrance time. So we're hoping to complete this project early next year. So that's all it's said and done. So just a picture on the right there. I know it is a little bit grainy, but it doesn't even do it that much justice. But that concrete is completely deteriorated. There's a lot of alligator cracking, and there's supposed to be a coating on top of that. That's just not there anymore. We'll be rehabbing all of that. That is it. We have to answer any questions.
Any questions? Right.
And I will now be handing it off to Camille.
Thank you, Orlando. Good afternoon, members of the committee. If you followed along to page 59, I'll provide the project updates. So this project, the Torrance Refinery Water Recycling Plant, reverse osmosis, product water tank, potable water connection, has recently gone through a design solicitation via our existing on-call consultants. So of the 6 engineering firms that we reached out to from our on-call, we received 2 proposals on July 1st. One was from AKM Engineers and the other was from Tetra Tech. West Basin Engineering staff evaluated the proposals and selected AKM Engineers. The design contract is for $139,364. That contract is still under processing, so the award has not been finalized. But I did want to point out that the fiscal year budget is for $103,000. However, this project is entirely refinery funded, so we do not anticipate any issues obtaining that funding. So the next slide, please. So to provide some background on this project, the project takes place at Torrance Refinery Water Recycling Plant, and this facility receives potable water from Metropolitan. In the event of an issue with the Title 22 supply, the plant has a swivel elbow to switch to backup potable water. So on the image on the right, you see the influent 12-inch potable water line that comes from the offsite and is located east of the nitrification tank. And then it travels to a 16-inch fiberglass reinforced plastic pipe that's shown in the left image in the center. And so right next to it is that swivel elbow. So the objective of the project is simply to provide operational flexibility and redundancy when the low pressure boiler feed system is offline. And the scope of work is to design a potable water connection from the reverse osmosis product water tank, from the potable water inlet to the reverse osmosis product water tank at Torrance. So the design consultant will be preparing a technical memorandum, and that will evaluate alternative pipeline alignments and potential methods of receiving or providing supplemental water to the RO product water tank. And then based on the chosen alternative from that technical memorandum, the consultant will prepare a design bid package. On the next slide, you'll see that the next steps is to complete that technical memorandum by September, and then eventually the design bid package by February. So that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Mike? None.
Dr. John.
Okay, good afternoon, directors. I've got here some updates on the DCS replacement project, starting on packet page 63. So here's the summary for this phase of the project. So far, we're on schedule. We're quickly approaching our anticipated GMP, our guaranteed maximum price, in September, which we'll aim to present to the board in October. In the last year, we've processed 13 RFIs and 49 submittals, with another 5 submittals still under review. We are also on budget, and we're anticipating this phase of the project will end fully within the original budget. I mentioned it last month, but we did have some cost overruns early on in the project of around $100,000. We've effectively managed the rest of the project to bring it back within the budget, and so we don't anticipate spending any of the contingency for this phase. I presented the latest construction cost estimate, the Class 3 estimate, last month. There's an overview here at the bottom of this slide, though, showing how that construction cost estimate has changed over time. If we go to the next slide, I have some more details. So when I presented the cost estimates last month, there was a request to provide more detail about scope changes and their impact on the construction cost. The 4th column here lists the major scope changes that have had an impact on the estimates. So starting with the additional 4,000 IO points that we discovered during our loop checks in October, this represents an increase of 40% over the originally anticipated number of points. So each one of these points is going to have to be manually pulled across into the new system. So that had a significant impact on the cost estimate increase of just under $2 million. Between November and February, we made some critical project scope decisions. Firstly, our system selection process recommended one of the least expensive systems on the market, and so that reduced the estimate by around $1.2 million. However, we also decided to start including ongoing support and subscriptions for the first 5 years in the estimate. Sorry. These are costs the district would have incurred anyway, but for transparency, we decided to roll them into the construction estimate, which increased by around $2.3 million. And finally, we made a decision to reuse the existing electrical enclosures and simply replace the back panels. So this not only meant that we wouldn't incur any additional civil expenses from having to open up the control rooms to fit new panels and new enclosures in, but it also saved us around $200,000 in anticipated materials, or as anticipated, save around $200,000 in anticipated materials. After that Class 4 estimate, we added a couple of allowances. These are potential cost additions if the district decides to trigger certain options. So the first of these is if the district cuts over the Torrance plant to Torque refinery ownership. The additional costs incurred here would be to make the site a standalone location that can be easily integrated into the Torque facility. These additional costs of approximately $400,000 would be paid by the refinery if this option is triggered. The second allowance is for additional loop checks prior to installing the new system. This allowance is a potential risk reduction measure as we're anticipating installation in late 2028, which will mean there'll be around 3 years between our initial loop checks and the system being installed. So these optional additional loop checks would minimize risk by reassessing the system. We effectively go out there into the field and manually check each component to capture any changes that might have occurred between our initial loop checks and system installation. West Basin staff have not yet decided if the additional proposed $200,000 would be worth the risk reduction, but that is an option we can trigger during construction. Overall, changes in scope have accounted for approximately $3.4 million of the construction cost estimate increases. This represents roughly 50% of the total increase from the original $12 million West Basin estimate prior to the project starting, with the other 50% mostly consisting of increased equipment and labor costs, a better understanding of the project, and finer granularity of cost estimations as we progress through the AACE cost estimation process. Our construction cost estimates, while trending upwards, are all well within the AACE recommended ranges. And so as we approach the GMP, which will represent a Class 2 cost estimate, we can be reasonably sure that the final guaranteed maximum price will fall somewhere around this $18.5 million figure. Next slide, please. So on to something I mentioned briefly last month. I want to do in more detail here. We're currently undertaking very early planning for the recycled water shutdowns that will be required when we install the new system. Unfortunately, these shutdowns are unavoidable. We aren't able to run our complex water treatment systems fully by hand, and we're effectively taking the control system offline. However, shutdowns significantly cost the district, both financially and potentially reputationally with our customers. So we know this project will result in shutdowns, and we're starting the planning very early, approximately 2.5 years before the first anticipated shutdown, so that we can have a solid plan we can communicate to customers and use to mitigate the impacts. The image here, it zooms in the next couple of slides, but it shows a map of our entire recycled water production at ECL, where the colors represent the different control panels that each system is connected to. In total, there are 14 different control panels at ECL, which are requiring replacement. And it's a requirement in the GMP that the contractor has to develop a detailed cutover plan for each one. And the schedule and duration of those cutovers and shutdowns will be locked into the treatment stage with liquidated damages associated for any overruns. As you can see here, our treatment system has grown pretty organically over the years, with nearly every process tied into everything else. So a lot of our initial work has been to disentangle these systems and assess how we can minimize downtime. Next slide, please. Here you can see the main areas where we separate the system into. These represent distinct processes. However, even these are interconnected through the control system, as you can see from the same colors popping up in multiple areas. Next slide, please. So zooming in, still a little bit blurry on this screen, but this area is the waste treatment process. So this is the backbone for any treatment requiring the use of water from Hyperion. Part of our shutdown planning is to bypass this area initially by inserting potable water further down the system, allowing us to cut this area over to the new control system. Next slide, please. The solids handling area at the top is at the end of the waste treatment process, and so will be initially bypassed while we use potable water. The Title 22 system is required for our satellite plants and our distribution system, but it's also required to process the waste from our microfiltration trains. And so it does affect every other process. Unfortunately, it is one of our oldest areas on site, and so will require the most work to manually cut over. Next slide, please. This area is an intermediate area used both to move water through our system, but also to prepare water for further treatment in our barrier and boiler feed processes. Bringing back up the Chevron boiler feed as quickly as possible is critical for our shutdown plan. It's our main priority. And so this area will be one of the second or probably third areas we bring back online. In the meantime, we'll be feeding potable water into the Chevron boiler feed system by inserting potable water in. You can't really see on this screen, but the MF Filtrate Clear Well, which is that blue box at the bottom right, effectively bypassing this area until we bring it back online. Next slide, please. And here you can see two of our customer-specific processes. So at the top is the barrier. This process will be shut down for the longest period, as the barrier can receive potable water directly from Metropolitan without any input from ECL, which takes the load of that system while we're maintaining water requirements. The Chevron boiler feed is the opposite. The refinery relies heavily on this water, and therefore the system is the most critical in our shutdown plan. And we're aiming for minimal disruption to that refinery. The only change will be a reduction in flow as we move to potable water input into our RO system. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, these shutdowns are anticipated in late 2028 or early 2029, so that we can avoid both the Olympics and the high demand summer months. We're currently anticipating a total duration of around 8 weeks, with systems coming on and offline during that period. The first of these is barrier production, which will be fully offline for the entire 8-week duration. It will be the first system taken offline and the last to come back online. Our refinery customers won't see full system shutdowns, but they will see reduced flow for around 6 weeks as we use potable water to replace our recycled water treatment. Our irrigation and commercial customers will likely see a full shutdown for around 6 weeks. However, we're currently looking at options such as intermittent service, temporarily cutting customers back off purple pipe, and even working with the county to try and supplement the system with potable. Those are the potential customer impacts we're tracking at this, again, very early initial planning stage. Over the next few months, we'll be working with the contractor to lock down the exact schedule and duration for the shutdown window. I mentioned that the schedule and duration has to be locked in the GMP as part of the requirements of the contract. Once we have that window, West Basin staff will work with Jacobs to reduce the impacts wherever possible for the implementation in late 2028, early 2029. In addition, West Basin staff are assessing the opportunities this shutdown might bring. We've only had one other planned recycled water shutdown since we started up, and that was only a week long. So there's a huge backlog of projects such as valve replacements, force main inspections, etc., that we may be able to do during this shutdown to make our system more reliable and efficient when it comes back online. As I've said, this is all in the very early planning stages. We've literally had 3 or 4 meetings on this so far. But we want to make the board aware of these potential impacts as soon as possible, and obviously we'll keep the board updated as we move through this planning stage. Next slide, please. This slide just shows the pre-construction schedule for the project. So as you can see, we're fully in the system design portion of this phase. Staff aims to come back to the board in September for approval of a professional services contract to design a new server room at ECL, and in October with the guaranteed maximum price proposal. That concludes my update on the DCS project. I welcome any questions. Thank you.
Any comments? Engineer, any comments?
No.
Director Ray, any comments?
No,
I will-
no, thank you.
One question and request on slide 19, page 64. So we went with the less expensive system. Can you provide us with what were the systems that were evaluated 2, 3, 4, however number, what the costs were for each system and what the support subscription costs were for each system?
Yeah, absolutely. I can provide that in a future update.
If you could send that, I know you don't have that right now.
Yeah, no
I
problem.
would like that to see that. Okay, so
Let's see the whole committee gets it.
Huh?
We should all get those communications.
and then moving on. That's it? Okay, well, thank you. With that, I think we don't have a closed session. And do we have any director's comments?
Things are probably being run very efficiently.
And thank you, this is Director Gray, and thank you to staff for all their reports this morning, this afternoon. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Steph.
All right, thank you, everybody. We are adjourned.